Alright, gents, it's that time of year again, and you're going to be asked the most useless and easy to answer question of the year.
What do you want for Christmas?
Every single time, it's bullets.
Something you can use all the time.
Well, and now we have an answer because today's video is sponsored by One Off, a company making innovative tools for gun guys. Their current lineup includes the OS tool, a combination strap cutter and stuck case extractor that is great to have on hand in the event that a case gets lodged in the chamber of your rifle. In addition to this, they also have their new Cross tool, which is a fantastic American-made multi-tool designed to help you clean the bolt carrier group of your AR while also serving as a bit driver, and it also has a bottle opener because this time of year, when you get questions like that, you'll probably be cracking a lot of bottles open. So if you need an answer for a present that you can actually use all the time while budgeting for the ammunition that she's not buying you, One Off's products are simple, multifunctional, and incredibly useful. Links to pick up both of these products, as well as to the company's website, where you can learn more, are listed in the description below, as well as the card that just popped up on screen. I'd like to thank One Off for sponsoring us because I do love to go to bat for companies that do stuff like this. They make life much, much easier. And with that said, let's get back to our video. KCI does not have a very good reputation with people that shoot guns a whole lot. I remember seeing magazines from them, particularly with like Glock magazines and that sort of deal, for almost as far back as I can remember with regards to like training spaces or gun shows or whatever. And they always seem to have like a favorable reputation with people that own like Kel-Tecs, in other words, people that don't shoot guns. But for those that went out and trained or went out to matches and that sort of stuff a whole lot, I've never really seen them do all that well, particularly when the environment got kind of bad. But over the years, it would seem that they're doing a little bit of a reform as far as like their company is concerned, and this also leads to them being quite bold, at least in my estimation, because KCI themselves reached out to me about 6 months ago and they asked me if I wanted a bunch of magazines to take a look at. Now, when I got these DMs, I started looking them up again and seeing what they're up to, and it seems that they're doing their best to almost go through like a rebrand where they're trying to retool a lot of different stuff, make a lot of things better, that sort of thing. And so I decided to say yes, why not? Let's give them a shot. And immediately they sent a half dozen Glock magazines and 8 rifle magazines for the AR. Now, they also asked me if I wanted to do MP5 magazines, and I declined only because every time I think about getting an MP5, things win out that, at least to me, are more practical, you know, like bullets and targets, and apparently I'm on a huge Beretta kick lately. But why not? Let's just integrate it into everything that I've been using lately. Let's go ahead and shoot the guns a lot. Let's see if they're actually improving their product line rather than just blow smoke up everybody's ass. And that's exactly what happened. We integrated it in. These magazines have been used in hot weather, cold weather, a lot of rain, a lot of mud, sand, stuff like that. And at this point, you guys know that if anything hangs around for 6 months, it's at least worthy, and if anything hangs around for at least 2-3+ years, then it's worth at the very least taking a look at, because we beat the brakes off of stuff all the time out here. So if nothing else, let's just go ahead and cut to the chase. Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit more specifically, and we're going to start with the Glock pattern magazines from KCI. Now, the same 6 magazines sort of got rotated into like a batch of 15, and generally speaking, if there was a magazine I was going to reach for first, it was from the KCI pile. Now, depending on what it was that I was doing, I probably needed more than 6 at the time, but you more or less get that there. The other half of this is that I turned these magazines loose over to students and would ask them, hey, sort of a pain in the ass, but would you like to run these 6 magazines all 3 days of class? And throughout the 6 months, I had 5 students that accepted that and would be like, yeah, why not? And while I do not have a good hard fixed round count on this, because it's honestly kind of difficult to do with magazines, especially if I'm rotating them in and out with OEM magazines, it's hard to get a fixed round count on it. But what I will say is that they were used exclusively by students in a higher volume setting, and because there was 5 of them, that's minimum 10,000 rounds on just these 6 magazines. Now, considering how much volume that is and how wear on springs work, and that it doesn't matter if it's compressed or decompressed, it's the compression decompression motion over and over again is what actually wears out springs. It's actually quite a bit. In addition to that, they were used with me a whole bunch, including my review on the RXM, and per the usual, we don't stop when the range starts, we just kind of keep going, and we've used it in a variety of different settings and temperature types, blah blah blah. So throughout all of that, everybody I asked about this, including my own thoughts more or less, less meshed up into this same thing, and that was the first thing that all of us noticed was that when you compare it to OEM Glock magazines, you notice instantly that the magazine springs themselves are noticeably weaker than an OEM Glock magazine. Now, what does noticeably really mean? I would compare this, especially seeing as I'm on this rabbit hole lately, I would compare the magazine spring not to an OEM Glock magazine spring, but to like a Metgar Beretta M92 magazine, in that Metgar magazine has nowhere near as stiff a spring as an OEM Glock's does, but it does feed reliably, and it's more or less something that you don't really have to think about too terribly much until you start to hit certain maintenance thresholds. And what I mean by that is, during the RXM review itself, I actually did have one quit on me because the magazine spring just wasn't keeping up anymore. I was starting to get failures to feed, things like that. And of course, it was doing that thing that magazines do where it doesn't just wholesale quit right away. Well, some magazines do this, but it doesn't wholesale just quit right away. It just starts to show signs of age, and that it'll feed a bit, but you start to question it a little bit, because when you look at that one in particular, you more or less know that if something's gonna happen, it's gonna happen to this one. And you know what? That's okay with me, at least, because now I more or less know what the endurance category is for these magazines, and that's a whole lot better than they used to be, and that was basically not good. Which is to say, the reliability of these magazines is in fact there, it's just not quite that of an OEM Glock magazine. And that's more or less how I look at it. Beretta 92 magazines are in fact reliable, but they're not going to hang for the same amount of time that an OEM Glock magazine does, and that's more or less the category that I filed this into. Since then, we've replaced that spring, and we've had no further issues from this magazine set, albeit, especially with the amount of stuff I'm doing with 92 series guns lately, and now that I'm also getting ready to review an APX A1, they have been used quite a bit less, so I'm not going to venture much further forward from, hey, this one magazine didn't want to work so good anymore, and then we replaced a spring on it. Now, I go through all of that autistic detail and whatnot to more or less say this. As far as regular line magazines go, or training magazines, or hell, even carry magazines and that sort of stuff, they do fine. They just don't have the same endurance. The endurance that they've got is similar to a 92 magazine from Metgar, which is to say, it's not bad. I've had no weird issues out of them. I've had nothing with regards to weird double stacking issues where rounds don't want to normally double stack, because you see that in some crappier magazines. Like ETS is really bad at that, where it just will not normally double stack, where you have some single stacks in there that shift around randomly. None of that shit was occurring in these magazines at all. They functioned as they were supposed to. We just have a slightly lesser endurance, which I'm honestly just sort of assuming will be remedied by throwing a Glock OEM spring in there when the original one knocks out. That said, I wouldn't have a problem with getting a boatload more of these and just running them. It would seem that KCI has more or less come quite a ways from what I used to observe from them in the past, in that from magazine to magazine it was more or less a roll of the dice. Occasionally you get a few really good ones in exchange for a few really bad ones. So, not bad. Let's go ahead and move on to the rifle magazine stuff now, because I require quite a bit more out of these. So, generally speaking, rifle magazines have to go through some bullshit, because not only do they have to be significantly more reliable than their pistol counterparts, because if I have a rifle out, why the do I ever want to go to that pistol ever? And they're also exposed to significantly more. Larger surface area of the magazines makes them deal with much greater environmental issues. Larger insides of the magazines make you deal with much more of exactly what I just stated as far as environment is concerned. Typically speaking, a lot of magazines are used as monopods, so they have to take a lot of impacts, and you have to maintain all of this reliability in a package that doesn't just double stack, but also double feeds, unlike a modern pistol magazine that only single feeds unless you have something like a 5.7 magazine. In addition to this, they also have to keep up with a quite high cyclic rate, because there isn't really a standard cyclic rate that end user adheres to anymore as far as their rifles are concerned. Now, there's a bunch of dorks that are about to list a bunch of numbers as far as cyclic rates to me, and that's cool if that were anywhere close to reality in practice, because end users are always going to either shorten their guns, can their guns, add in recoil systems, add new buffer buffers, new springs, whatever, so the end user cyclic rate is all over the place. So the safest bet for a reliable rifle magazine is to make the thing feed at over 1,000 rounds per minute, which, considering all of the other factors that you rope into place that make making a reliable rifle magazine difficult, you add this altogether new pain in the ass into the equation as well, and you have quite a few problems to solve. Never mind the fact that you could create a really good magazine and then some asshole drops a 45-pound weight on your magazine for science reasons, and then other people are going to jump in and make comments about how your magazine did. So as far as general public is concerned, the requirements for a standard AR rifle magazine are actually really ridiculous. And most of the time it's not without warrant. We have learned a lot about what is required through a standard rifle magazine now, and they're not necessarily disposable items anymore. Now, yes, I get it, it's a consumable item, but it needs to have non-consumable item reliability before it gets just turned into an attritable asset. And what I put my rifle magazines through is no less bullshit, because they have to deal with suppressed, unsuppressed, they have to deal with tons of different weather, they have to deal with most of the time pretty high cyclic rates, and also when I go from the standing to the prone, generally speaking, I move as though A, I actually need to get into the ground, and 2, I also move as if I don't have an extra 200 pounds of obesity slowing me down. So when my rifles make contact with the ground, they do so quite hard. In addition to the fact that we also have a bunch of forced reset stuff going on with my guns, and now we have a lot of stuff adding stressors to my magazines. And I will say that all of these things being considered and all this autistic train set details said, the KCI rifle magazines are the real highlight of the show here, because I don't know how it's even possible that you can make an item that feels cheap. Like the magazine itself, it feels not good. It feels in the hand like a type of plastic item that will come apart, and I wasn't too impressed, but they also managed to make it quite reliable. Now, the translucent I can see, and there's numbers for everything all the way down the line. Stuff is pretty cool, but that's merely an add-on, a cool factor thing. What matters is that when I see a little bit of steel reinforcement on the inside of my feed lips, I'm quite happy about it. What matters is over the course of the lifetime of these magazines, did we have any changes in how they load or unload? Meaning, am I detecting spring pressure loss, things like that? None of that happened. And of course, did we have any cracks or fissures in the magazines? Did they start to peel apart? And the answer to that is no. As far as reliability is concerned, absolutely nothing happened to these magazines, and I'm quite happy about them, frankly, because since this whole thing started, and since I honestly put out my Lancer magazine review, I've been spending every minute of my rifle time off of Magpul magazines just to see what would happen. And maybe this is just a luck of the draw, but the magazines that I picked to more or less be examples of replacements for the Magpul magazine have not changed my life at all. I haven't suffered any reliability problems whatsoever, and these KCI magazines are one big part of that. Because, again, much like the Glock magazines, as often as possible, I sort of cycled these guys in just to see what would happen. They spent a lot of time loaded and unloaded and being loaded. So, considering all these other factors, I'm quite impressed by these magazines. And in all honesty, I did not see this coming, because given their previous reputation, in my mind, if there was something that KCI was gonna up, it's rifle magazines. But as far as overall performance is concerned, there you go, kiddo. The rifle magazines are just fine. Now, as far as the big question that's, would I put this into duty gear is concerned, well, I will say yes for one, and I'll keep an eye on the other. And that's more or less obvious at this point. Over a 6-month period, if I have one that has a magazine spring quit, I'm going to pay attention to that magazine set over time to see what's what on that. There's more data to pull from that sort of deal. And by the way, even though we did replace the spring in one, it was still more or less getting it done. The failures that I did have out of that magazine were more or less spaced out. It didn't just instantly quit. So again, that's what makes me keep an eye on that rather than just say, hey, I'm gonna sling this into a duty belt and call it. But as far as the rifle magazines are concerned, I see no real qualitative difference between it and my Lancer magazines that regularly run just fine, or indeed my Duromag stuff, my SureFeed stuff, or even the Magpul magazines that I'm used to at this point. How the magazines themselves feel is one thing, but how they perform is another, right? So I gotta give it to them. They hit a real real home run with these AR magazines, and I would absolutely have no issues using them long-term or in a duty capacity at all. Time will tell, of course, but at least right now, my opinions on it are the rifle magazines are good to go for whatever you want them for, and at bare minimum, the pistol magazines are significantly better than anything Magpul's ever made for a Glock in the first place, because the instant that those magazines start to encounter any sort of adverse weather at all, they simply quit showing up to work. Like, I can't stress enough, Magpul makes a super shitty Glock magazine. Everyone needs to know it, and everyone that denies it is someone that doesn't shoot guns a lot. That's just a fact. Seen it a million times. I don't care what your opinion is, and I definitely don't care what the little comment is below trying to prove me wrong. I've seen it so many times that I'm sick of seeing these magazines anywhere near the orbit of one of my classes, because I know that that dude's about to have a lot of problems. And with regards to magazines for pistols and stuff, I would file these, at least for now, under training magazines or competition magazines or whatever. I need more data on them because I had one spring not keep up on me, and yes, I understand that that's super duper autism, but when you see something like that, you need more data. That said, as previously stated, they're significantly better, especially in weather, than anything Magpul's put out. So if you're trying to stack up a million magazines for training or whatever, this really is the slightly cheaper alternative that everyone's trying to save like $2 a unit on. So there you go. As far as a million questions are concerned revolving around these magazines, that's my answer. If you want to support us through Patreon, that's awesome, because you guys really are the lifeblood of the channel. You more or less ensure that I can continue to do all this nonsense. And if you want to get something out of that, $41 a month gets you as much open enrollment training as you'd like, unless it's something logistically difficult like a soft skin vehicle class for pretty obvious reasons, or a private class, which that's pretty obvious as well. That said, all the other open enrollment stuff is game. If you'd like to check out all of our extra social media stuff, links for all this are in the description below. We're also on Rumble now. We just sort of added things into it because having a second spot to land is not a terrible idea. Also, if you're a school resource officer or a school teacher, we'd have to go back and forth a little bit about credential verification, and no, I'm not going to call your employer, but the main benefit to you two different types of folk is that I train you guys for free forever, for honestly pretty obvious reasons. So if you want to take advantage of that, let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and learned something from it, give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit the notification bell also, and set that to all, because that's the real subscribe button anyway. And remember guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Easy.